Sobriety is a podcast for people who are seeking or who have found a secular path to recovery from addictions of all kinds. Oh, well, welcome to another episode. Today I have a guest. Her name is Kayla C. And she wrote me an email a couple weeks ago letting me know that she is looking for stories for a book that she'd like to compile of recovery stories of atheists and agnostics, I guess, in recovery. And I thought, well, that is really, I would like to know the story behind this. So I asked her if she would come on the podcast. She says, I've never done that before. Not sure, but I'll do it. And here she is.
Yep.
So welcome, Kayla. It's good to have you.
Here we go, I guess. Thank you. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, I wonder what is behind this. Can you kind of give the background of what happened that led up to you wanting to do this?
Yes, I've been drinking for years and years. I was a bartender for about 10, 12 years. My body actually just started deteriorating, and I
Yeah.
finally decided to go to Mayo for inpatient treatment. I chose Mayo because it's a little bit more science-based than some of the other places I could have gone. Really enjoyed it, actually. So shout out to Mayo, I guess. But while I was there, we were required to go to AMA meetings, which was fine. I enjoyed it. I appreciate the connectedness and, you know, that kind of thing about it, but the God thing doesn't really resonate with me personally. And I respect people that it does because I mean I wish I had that.
Sure.
But it would seems like it makes
Yeah.
life maybe easier. I don't know. But I didn't. And so every time I'd go, I thought to myself, like, as much as the stories and the connection helps, it doesn't actually fit what I need or what
Hmm.
I'm assuming a growing number of people need because statistically we're moving farther and farther away from religion,
That's true.
especially organized religion.
That's true.
So, um, and people continue to tell me, well, your higher power can be anything. But if you've ever been to an AA meeting,
They're
that's
always pushing you.
they're
You can
they're
start here, but eventually you'll go to the
yeah, like they're talking
yeah.
about God. Like,
Yeah, they
let's be
are. They
real.
definitely are.
So while I was doing that, I liked some of the big book stories because it kind of reminded me of reading Chicken Soup for the Soul when I was a kid, that the compilation of stories
Hmm.
that some just really hit you and you feel like, okay, someone else out there is experiencing what I'm experiencing. And I
Hmm.
think that is a, a cornerstone of, recovery. It's just recognizing that you're not alone and meeting people in the same spot. Because for me personally, I had to relearn how to socialize. I mean, I've been in the bar scene for so long that living a sober life and fully living one, which is the point of recovery, not just white knuckling it. Like, you want to live a life in recovery is really hard to do without making those connections. So I think there's just lacking a platform other than this. This is why I love this show, like a platform for people that have lack those beliefs to
Yeah.
share their stories of empowerment and how they get through it, and tips on what you do to stay sober. I mean, just basic things that don't necessarily go with the whole God has led me on this path to sobriety thing,
Yeah.
because that's just not my scene. And I feel like I've connected with plenty of people who would really appreciate something like that. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's the kind of stories I'm looking for, I
Yeah.
guess.
Well, I think you are absolutely right. I I'm like you. If somebody wants, if somebody's comfortable with a religious background and a spiritual path or whatever, that's fine. As long as they don't push that on me to do, they
Hmm.
can do that. They can do their own thing, and I'm sure for them that's very enriching and so forth. But for me personally, um, it's more enrich. My recovery means more to me, and it's richer and fuller when I can think about it in my own way,
Hmm.
and describe it with my own language, and not feel like I have to conform to someone else's idea. I don't need a higher power. I've got other people in my life. That's what
Hmm.
works for me, and I'm cool with that. So
Yeah.
yeah, and there is a need for more of these stories
Hmm.
out there. Uh, and I like the idea of this book. So it's sort of like a chicken for the soul, but for what are you looking for? What kind of
I
stories are you
guess
looking for? In
I kind of want all over the gamut. I haven't quite. I mean, this is kind of on a whim, to be honest. This
Sure, I
this
hear you.
this came to me in like a couple. I was talking to a friend of mine who actually has a podcast that's pretty great too. I'm going to shout out "Life Not Wasted,"
Not a
and
life not wasted.
yes,
Okay.
and her name's Amber, and she kind of was a force for me, pushing. Like she not only kind of shot it to me straight and said, "You need to get some help," and I respected that, but she also did it too. Like she led by example, and so we were chatting one day, and it just kind of came to me like, we don't have a lot. Like, you're one of the only resources that people have to feel connected, because it's like we said, as much as you pretend that like AA will try to shift it where it's not religious based, it just is at the end of the day.
Yeah.
That is the main focus. And I think that can work for some people if they're doing it along with maybe other treatment options, if
Hmm.
they do have some kind of religious background. But I don't see why at in 2021 we can not have maybe something for atheists and agnostics where they can feel connected and really hear their own stories within other stories. And so I'm looking for anything from like the gritty, real, and the big book's language is, it's like written in like 1935
Sure.
or something. It could be maybe our vernacular
Right.
maybe a little different now, you know?
Speaking the way that we talk now.
Yes.
Yeah.
So um I kind of want just any stories of personal growth, what you do to get through,
Hmm.
um, from the gritty stuff to, the happy stuff, because there's some really negative sides to recovery. Relapse is a part of recovery. Like,
Hmm.
it can be messy.
It can.
And I think it's worth talking about instead of pretending that it's not a thing, like
Hmm.
I think people like to know that, like, me at my lowest was someone else was there too, like, but look at them now. Those growth stories are just so inspiring,
Hmm.
and that's just kind of what I'm looking for. Nothing specific, so there's no wrong answer here,
Right.
you know
Yep. Yeah. You can actually go. And I've been in recovery for a long time. I will be for the rest of my life, but for decades now, 30 some years.
Oh, good for you.
Yeah, well, it's just because I'm old and I've lived a long time and haven't drank. But the thing is, there have been periods of my life after many years of sobriety, several years of sobriety, where I had some rough spots, and was able to get through those sober, and that was all part of my growth too. And a lot of times you don't hear the stories of people who um, have. I mean, it seems like a lot of times the stories that we hear are, I was a drunk, I got sober, and I lived happily ever after.
Yes.
And but there's a lot of ups and downs along the
Yes.
way, and there's nothing wrong with that because you learn through those ups and downs too. I mean, it's
Hmm.
all part of our experience.
Hmm.
So yeah, I definitely like that. I was wondering, did you grow up without going to church or anything, or did you adopt this worldview later on?
I grew up I call it fake Catholic.
Okay.
We rarely went to church. I mean, I was confirmed, I was in Sunday school, that kind of thing. But I grew up in a really small Minnesota town where it was kind of just what you did.
Yeah.
My
Yeah.
parents, I don't, my mom, I would say my mom's religious, but they're very liberal in terms of thought process on that kind of. I know my mom would probably like for me to be more
Mm-hmm.
religious, but she
Mm-hmm.
doesn't push it on me really. My dad, he's just kind of not so much.
Yeah.
But very liberal views. And I mean, I came out when I was my early 20s.
Oh.
And that was a scary thing for me, especially growing up Catholic or whatever.
Yeah.
So, but they handled it, but it did affect my life, that shame that you feel can
Mm-hmm.
kind of change you. And my sister works in social services, and she kind of likes to remind me that part of recovery is learning coping mechanisms, learning why, like, what kind of, like, why do you feel the need to drink today, like what,
Mm-hmm.
like digging deeper is important. And that's why AA, a standalone program of AA, I don't think is very, it's not going to do its job by itself, frankly,
Right.
because you need something beyond, God's will to be sober. I think that's just a
Yeah.
personal opinion.
Yeah.
So
So, how did you end up in an AA meeting, and what were your impressions of it?
I went to my first AA meeting at Mayo during my
Oh,
treatment center
okay,
at Mayo.
okay,
We had a few that were required, which I do get pushing AA on people simply because there's not a lot of other resources,
yeah. I mean, it's
and
it's everywhere,
yeah, and it's yeah,
and
easy
it's
to
free.
access, it's free, and you get the community, which is nice. Um, but yeah, so that was my first experience. I found that I liked going to NA meetings
Oh,
more.
mm-hmm.
I think they just had a more free flow. But I mean, that's meetings are different everywhere you
Sure.
go.
Yeah, it
So I don't
depends on
like
what
to.
group and
So
yeah, what.
and I've had some great experiences at AA meetings, but in the scheme of things, it's not going to really. It doesn't sit with me right. Like it's not
Yeah,
my personal thing, and I would really like to hear other people's stories about how they did it without that because I don't have that. I don't
yeah.
have, this like higher power saving me from alcohol. I have to
No.
figure out a way to do that without that idea in my brain because I just don't have that.
I was similar to you in that I didn't grow up. I didn't grow up in any religion though at all. I didn't go to church. Parents didn't push any sort of religious beliefs on us at all. And I knew nothing about religion, but I also knew nothing about AA going into it. And I had
Hmm.
no idea that there was going to be anything to do with God in AA. All I knew about AA was from what I would see in the movies, and never in the movies when someone goes to a meeting do they stop and say the Lord's Prayer or anything like that. So I had no idea there was any of that. So it really kind of surprised me. But I think now people do before they even get to their first meeting, they're kind of prepared for that. Were you?
Absolutely. Oh, yes. I didn't want to go. I
Yeah.
I was I'm pretty firm in my atheism,
Uh
or
huh.
I'm kind of, I don't even like to say, I guess, strict atheism. I don't pretend to know everything or know that there is no God, but I most certainly don't believe in it.
Yeah.
So going in, having that knowledge of the premise was just like, I was already kind of just pessimistic about the whole thing.
Yeah.
I ended up taking more out of it than I thought I would,
Hmm.
simply because I was kind of we were alone at treatment, so I didn't, and it was nice to, like I said, hear those stories. It's interesting and it's fun, and it brings everyone together, and that kind of unity, it does help you in sobriety, but there's just that underlying constant factor of God's going to get you through this that I just it doesn't affect me in that way. And I would love I know that the faction of people that have those feelings seems to be getting bigger by the
Oh
day,
yeah. Absolutely.
so it's kind of, I think it's important for us to have a platform to discuss these things and find other ways, discuss your own. I want to hear about so and so's coping mechanisms,
Hmm.
how they get through those those real bad cravings,
Hmm.
those kind of things.
Well, I think that our numbers are growing. I think that COVID was kind of a mixed blessing in a way because it kind of forced us online, and so people are finding these secular meetings online
Hmm.
on Zoom and so forth. And there's so many of them now. I don't even know how many there are. There's hundreds of them now.
Hmm.
And if life ever returns to normal, I'm sure someday it will. If those meetings go into brick and mortar, I mean, it could be a game changer as far as secular recovery goes. Also, I think more people are finding smart recovery, which is really good too.
Yes.
I like smart. I took the training in smart, and I want to go to more of those meetings because I like the practical tools that they have.
Hmm.
And but it's interesting, yeah. And I kind of mixed the two. I'd mix that with AA because I've been in AA for so long. I've got friends there. I'd like to
Hmm.
hang on to those friends. I like going to meetings and see those people. But then I also like the tools that I get from Smart and some of the other things that I'm involved with
Yeah,
online.
like a blended version of the two
Yeah,
programs, perhaps. Yeah,
yeah,
I kind of agree. I've been to both, like enough of both to kind of agree with you that there's certain aspects of the AA meetings that I do find beneficial, and I do
yeah,
think, or just I guess the layout of the meeting or
yeah,
whatnot. But yeah, on the other end, I think smart recovery is just much more where I'm at in terms of the science based, rewiring our brains
mm-hmm,
just to make different choices, and just learning about why you are where you are, what you can do to fix it. I'm very practical about that. I want to know I want to know the why of some of the things. I want to know what's going on. I mean, I'm in therapy now. I've, just digging deep is important, I think. And I just think AA kind of just touches the surface because at the end of the day, it's in God's hands,
Right.
and I
Right.
think that's a cop out.
Yeah, it is. When you get to, well, a lot of the steps mention God, but the two steps after you get done with your taking a look at yourself, take an honest look at yourself, you figure out what's going on with you, your motives, and why you react the way you do in life. But then you go to these two steps where you really start changing. But the way the steps are written, you don't really have to do anything because God does it all.
Yeah.
But that's the point in a person's recovery when they start doing things like going to therapy, when they start looking at other aspects, they start taking more of a holistic look at their entire life and their entire recovery.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when a lot happens. And it's kind of funny. I'm a pretty hard atheist, but those two steps, 6 and 7, when I look at them in a secular way and I think about what I did at that time in my life, there's
Mm-hmm.
actually a lot of work, a lot going on there that you
Mm-hmm.
miss out on if you just say that God does it all.
Yep.
And what's funny is in a lot of the meetings, I always tell the same jokes over and over, but in a lot of the meetings when they talk about step 6 and 7,
Mm-hmm.
um, you always hear everybody say, "I don't know, God just hasn't taken my defects of character away. He just hasn't taken my."
Right.
It's like, well, maybe,
Oh
maybe I'll
man,
tell you something.
like there is not enough praying in the world, honey.
I don't know why he just hasn't done
It's so crazy.
it.
Praying for years. Oh,
That is kind of
it
funny.
is. It is sometimes. It's like, oh, it really. It's always a crapshoot when you go to a meeting too. It's a new meeting because you're like,
Yeah,
this could be complete. Some of them that are not drenched in
and it's true.
Christianity, but so it's I don't know. I think part of it is like my firm atheism that I come in annoyed maybe a little because I'm
I
just
can
like
understand that.
I already kind of know what the vibe's gonna be.
Yeah, I
And
can understand that.
I just feel like we ignore a completely separate part of our recovery there.
Yeah,
Like just ignore, like the mental health dual diagnosis is so strong in addicts.
yeah,
And we almost just pretend like God will take care of that too.
right.
And we don't discuss those things, at least in my experience.
No, you're right. In fact, so I started. I was 25 years old. This is like 33 years ago now, and at that time, and I guess a lot hasn't changed, but at that time, I actually had people um, tell me I shouldn't be going to therapy. I shouldn't be doing these things.
Yeah.
That all I needed was to pray and to not be selfish and all this stuff. And what I did, I just conformed to whatever they thought whatever I thought they wanted me to do and say, and I did that for a long time. But when I got to the point over a period of time, it was like maybe several years, I don't know, but it was just a while where I just started thinking more and more that, I don't think that there's a God. I really don't. I really think I'm an atheist. And then I started reading these books by Christopher Hitchens, Richard Dawkins,
Hmm.
and I was convinced. Finally, I said I am an atheist, and it scared me at first because I thought, well, shit. I mean, but at that point, I'd been in AA for 25 years,
Hmm.
and I thought, how am I going to fit in? What am I going to do? You know?
Yeah.
So what I did, I was going to meetings at first, and I wouldn't tell anybody I was an atheist. I wouldn't tell
Hmm.
anybody I read those books or anything.
Yeah. At
I
that
kept
time,
it
especially,
because,
like, nope.
well, for 25 years, I'd hear people say really bad things about atheists.
Oh,
That
yeah.
that we are unhappy, blah blah blah, and even the big book kind of insults us. So I felt stigmatized, so I didn't say anything.
Hmm.
But slowly and surely, especially after I started learning about these secular meetings going on out there, slowly but surely I started speaking out about how I really felt about the program. And once I did that, there was no turning back.
Hmm.
And I couldn't be comfortable anymore in that meeting.
Nope.
So I couldn't.
Oh, no.
And it wasn't anything against them. Maybe a lot of people were cool, but there were enough people in there that made me uncomfortable that I just couldn't do it anymore. And
Hmm.
so now I only go to secular meetings now. And
I would
uh,
have to.
yeah, yeah. So I can understand, especially if, because you went through that. You went through that too, where you came out as an atheist.
I've never not been an atheist. I did
Never
not.
not been, but
There's
you
never a
like,
moment where I was like, that thing that's real. Like I believed in Santa Claus more than I believed in God my whole life.
right.
So
Yeah.
yeah. So at least I didn't have to come out as an atheist. I had to come out as gay, which
Oh,
was
I see.
not as fun.
Okay. Okay.
You know,
Okay. So
I
when you
like
said you were coming out, I thought you
yeah,
meant I
yeah,
thought.
nope, nope.
Okay.
I didn't have
That wasn't
they've
a big.
known since 5 probably that I'm like, you guys are ridiculous for thinking this is real. But
Okay, that's funny.
yeah,
Yeah, because I did that little coming out as an atheist thing in AA, and it was like it was so dramatic and everything. But
yeah.
yeah, I just had to go.
It's just like it's I think it's a separate line of thought completely though that makes it difficult to transition into an AA meeting because
Yeah.
if you don't believe in that, and which I found that Christians find very hard to accept. Like I posted this about my stories that I wanted on this like sober website thing where there's
Hmm.
thousands of people, and I found that Christians were probably even subconsciously very agitated. Just I made it very clear that this has nothing to do with any bias towards religion.
Right.
I just think we need, maybe a platform for other, for atheists and agnostics.
And this was
And
not an AA site; it was just a
no, this
recovery
is just
site.
like a recovery site. And yeah, it didn't go well, needless to say. People, and I had a couple people come to my rescue and say she didn't offend you in any way. And that everyone has a higher power thing really
Um,
frustrates me because it's like
yeah,
I don't. And
I
when
don't
people say
either.
nature, I'm like, I like nature. It's not keeping me sober. Like,
It's it's ridiculous language. I don't, I don't, I finally, I said, you know what? I don't talk that way. I don't have higher powers. There are people in my
mhm.
life who help me. And that's all there is to it.
Yeah,
This higher power thing, I don't do that. I don't
I
need to
have a
figure out,
support system.
I have a support system, right?
Like what are we like a higher power? Like why does it happen? That's just such like you said, ridiculous terminology.
Yeah.
So yeah,
But
I
it is
clear.
funny too. A lot of those people probably were, it's weird. I have a friend, a new friend from St. Louis, and I actually did a podcast episode with him, but I'm afraid to post it. But the guy is super Christian, Christian as hell. He can't finish a sentence without talking about how great Jesus is. He's just really, really seriously Christian,
Mhm.
and he knows I'm an atheist, and he knows that my recovery is all about a secular recovery, but he can't seem to understand that how his beliefs could be could trigger like a traumatic or reaction in someone else. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
He eh, to him it's so normal and comfortable, and so it's like I don't know. At a certain point, if I continue my friendship with him, I'm just going to have to say, you really got to cut this stuff out.
Yeah.
The Jesus stuff I just can't handle. It's too much.
Oh,
Sorry.
and I'm not very good at holding my tongue. So I mean, I
Yeah.
am in social circumstances, but sometimes my mom gets just a head shake, because it does get frustrating when it's like, don't push it out, just stop.
Yeah.
Like I don't tell you all about my atheist views. I just live my life,
Right.
like
Right.
um
Yeah.
I mean
So
will if you want to know, that's for sure. But
yeah. So I do, just putting this book together would be a good experience if you can do it because
mhm.
of all the people that you'll meet. That was been my experience with this podcast. I've been able to talk to a couple hundred people by now over the last few years, and I've learned so much, and it's been such an amazing experience. And I think that if you were fortunate enough to have people contribute these stories, it would be something similar. I get a lot out of people's stories, and so if I'm talking to somebody on a podcast and listening to their story and then editing it later, I mean that their story is in my brain pretty
Yeah.
much forever
Mhm.
and has meant a lot to me and enriched my life. And a book like this would do the same thing, putting it together, because you're going to be getting all these stories, you're going to be reading them
Yeah. I mean,
carefully, and
uh,
putting it all together. It's a lot of work too, but it would be a
yeah.
great experience.
If nothing else, it's great for my recovery, and I just think it would be a I just think it'll be interesting if nothing else,
Yeah.
and people, there's so many stories, and everyone, I found that alcoholism or addiction of any kind is, on a scale, and people have very different experiences with it. And so a compilation of stories where even if just one reaches you, you feel better that day, and I just think that we don't have that, they AA has the big book. Would
Mm-hmm.
be nice to, if I'm having a rough day or whatever, to read a story that, just makes me feel at least less alone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Hmm.
And also, yeah, I think I yeah, there's definitely need for that. Plus, there's a lot of people, a lot of us out there, and we're a lot easier to get a hold of now.
Hmm.
Um, Social media, podcasts, every it's not hard to find uh, an agnostic or atheist in recovery anymore. There's so many of us that are outspoken now,
I
and
like that.
yeah, it is cool. It could be transformative, and it is really important too. It's like, why even bother with that? It's just one more obstacle to put in front of somebody
Hmm.
that's really unnecessary.
Yeah.
um so it just makes sense to me. So, but
Yeah. I mean, for me right now, it's all about personal growth and trying to, I mean, it's a, it was a drastic life change for me going from
yeah.
downtown bartending to, you know, trying to refigure it was my whole image. It was my identity was, downtown bar and a busy bar. They
I
were
was
my
going to
family.
ask you about that. So I did a podcast episode with a person who started this organization called Ben's Friends, and
Oh.
Ben's Friends is it's a recovery group for people who are in the um, bar and restaurant industry.
Mhm.
And he was telling me that people that work in the food and beverage industry have a really hard time, and especially in 12
Oh.
step programs,
Mhm.
because a lot of the times they're given the advice that you need to quit your job.
Yeah.
And they don't want to do that. And a lot of times their job is everything to them. They love their job and so
Mhm.
forth. What about, how did you deal with that? Did you remain in the same
No,
position?
I
You
had to
didn't, you had to
leave.
leave.
I started bartending and serving tables in college, and I realized that with my major, I'm making more money doing this than I would be with my
Right.
major at the,
Right.
so, and I loved it, like it was enjoyable for me. I was good at it. It's nice to feel good at something. This is
Sure.
another part of why recovery's been difficult for me because, like I said, that was my identity. I loved serving. I loved being out there in the public and meeting people, but drinking a lot comes with the bartending. I don't know what the service industry, I'm sure that's
Mm-hmm.
with a lot of different professions, but we're already at a bar, we're
You're
already
there.
at a restaurant. A lot of times, I mean, you work until 3 a.m. sometimes, and fortunately sometimes you sneak drinks on the job. It's just
Yeah.
it's part of our lifestyle, and it's hard to leave because it's a family vibe that you get when you
Right.
work in a restaurant for a while or a bar for a while, and it's
Yeah.
tough. It felt like losing my entire life. Like I didn't know what to do anymore. Like brunch, I would drink, bowling, I would drink. Literally I'm Lacrosse, Wisconsin's not exactly the
Oh,
prime
lacrosse.
location to be. So
My brother lived in lacrosse. I've been up
yes.
there a lot. Yeah, there's like a bar in every corner, isn't there?
Yes, we had most bars per capita in the United States for a while.
Oh,
So
really? Yeah, it's
yes.
really cool. I love the downtown there, but yeah,
Oh, it's
absolutely. There's a
wonderful.
bar
But
everywhere.
yes, and you just kind of after working down there for a while, you do become like a bit of a staple. And now it's like it's been really good for me to take a step back and think like I don't think being a downtown drinker slash bartender should be my identity. Like there has to
Yeah,
be so much more to me, right?
yeah,
So taking time to learn and figure what that is out is so important to me, but it's very hard. And
yeah. I
so,
imagine.
yeah, I actually am very interested to check out that what you just told me about.
I'll email you a link
Yeah,
to
thank
it.
you.
Yeah, he's a really nice guy. He's been in the restaurant business for a long time. He is based in Charleston, and he was just talking about the long hours that you have to put in that industry, the late nights, and then having to deal with recovery and being around alcohol,
Hmm.
so much
And
of it.
most of us aren't used to doing a 9 to 5, or
Mm-mm.
we work odd shifts. We're on our feet. It's a big change. and it's less money, and it's not, well, at least it's not cash in your hand at the end of the night.
Yeah.
It's a giant change. It's like a lifestyle change on a lifestyle change,
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
it's been it's been pleasant to find out though how many people are so supportive, and
Mm-hmm.
and I've really found my bar family has stuck with me, so that's
Good.
lovely.
And do you have how's your recovery going? How you doing with that?
It's good, and I'm not gonna say good is a generous term.
Mm-hmm.
I have had recent struggle. I started a new job. I'm in real estate now, which is
Oh,
lovely. But I did. I'm moving into a sober house. I think that hopefully
okay.
this next week, just because just had a couple lapses, and I think the structure might be good for me.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. So I'm just making some changes to fit my needs right now, and
Mm-hmm.
I think that'll be wonderful. I'll be right next to my job, and yeah, but I
Good.
mean, I'm not going to pretend like it's going phenomenally,
No.
but I'm more self-aware, I would
Yeah.
say, and I think that's one of the biggest things you can do in recovery is just recognize when you're falling down that shame hole or that rabbit hole of, it's so easy to hate yourself for doing it again, and then it spirals because that shame causes you to not want to feel that shame anymore, and pretty soon you've ruined your life in a few days kind of thing, and
Yeah.
you
It's so if I understand recovery is just a process of change, and that doesn't mean that it's just all straight up. I mean,
yes,
so even anyone who has a lapse, it doesn't mean that you've lost anything that you've already built up beforehand,
no, it's a learning
and it's just
experience.
part of the learning experience as you keep growing and changing. So
Mhm.
there's nothing at all about that anyone,
Yeah.
but unfortunately, especially it's more so like if you in smart, it's not as stigmatized if you have a lapse at all,
Mhm.
as it is in like 12-step programs. In
Yes.
12-step programs, they say, okay, you got to all go all the way back to the step one again. Whereas in like smart, you don't even have that kind of a linear thing. You just say, okay, this
Yeah.
is the tool I'm going to use, or I'm going to use that tool.
Mhm.
And they also anyway, it's just really interesting. It's very different. It's just very different,
Yeah.
and I kind of like that
I
approach.
do too.
So
I
yeah,
just think that, every time, I mean, and I'm not saying, keep relapsing,
no, no,
I'm just,
no,
it does happen.
it
It's a
does
thing.
happen.
I immediately when you asked me that, I went to like AA mode where I was
Oh,
like, don't
I'm sorry.
tell. No, I don't. I was just
Yeah,
like, don't tell them. And then I'm like,
yeah.
no, that's defeats the purpose of this. I've had,
So
COVID has
get
been a
this.
struggle.
I was talking to someone on a podcast interview. Her name is Susie, and she's like she has a book club, the Soberish Book Club. So she reads like crazy, and she was telling me that she read that most people in AA have relapsed and don't say anything.
Absolutely. I have no doubt. It
Yeah,
doesn't being in those meetings, it does not surprise me. And I don't think they're doing anything on purpose to
no,
shame you.
no, they're just
It's just part of the culture of AA,
yeah, they don't want.
and
Yeah, it's just so yeah. It's weird to think that,
mm,
but then again, it's normal too because it's all part of it. It's all part of
yeah,
it. So
it really is.
it's something else. So anyway, to collect these stories, how can people get a hold of you?
I will have you post my email if that works for
Okay,
you.
that'll work.
It is just my full name, Kayla Connor,
Okay, okay,
CONNOR.KC@gmail. So you can just post that if you'd like.
cool.
And yeah, email me, let me know, if you want
Okay,
to, even just if you email me and you want to talk on the phone, just, ask me for my number and we can do that. I know, and don't be scared. There's no specific stories I want, there's no criteria, there's no rubric to follow,
mm-hmm,
I just
mm-hmm.
kind of want to hear your thoughts, your feelings, how you've handled it so far, your personal growth stories, anything.
Yeah, I
Yep.
like it. I like it. So, oh, there we go. And there we go. That's another episode of Beyond Belief Sobriety. Thank you for listening. And thank you, Kayla, for being here.
Thank you for having me.